Welcome to Crime Over Wine Weekly. It's Sunday, February 4th. I'm Liam Collins. Here are your crime headlines. Alec Baldwin pleaded not guilty this week to involuntary manslaughter charges related to that deadly shooting on the set of the movie Rust. The actor, known for his roles on 30 Rock and SNL, was practicing a cross draw on the set of the movie in October of 2021 when the gun fired, killing 42-year-old cinematographer Helena Hutchins. If convicted, Baldwin could face up to 18 months in prison. A judge denied Alec Murdaugh's request for a new trial in just 16 minutes. Murdaugh claimed the court clerk assigned to his double murder trial for the deaths of his wife Maggie and son Paul interfered with jury members by telling them to, quote, watch his body language. The judge ruled there was not enough evidence that the clerk's actions had a significant impact on the verdict. Murdaugh is serving a life sentence for the double murders, as well as 27 years for admitting to stealing $12 million from his law firm. In Akron, Ohio, a woman was sentenced to life in prison for a second time for her role in the death of a pizza delivery driver. Erica Stefanko is accused of misleading 25-year-old Ashley Biggs with a fake pizza order. Investigators say once she arrived to the location, she was tased, beaten, and strangled by Stefanko's then-husband, Chad Cobb. Cobb is serving a life sentence for his part in the murder. And this week on Crime Over Wine Weekly, we are one step closer to finding out how 3 friends died outside of their friend's home during that cross-country deep freeze earlier this month. Plus, it's been 9 years since anyone has seen Sarah Graham, what's happening in her case, and how you can help. But first, let's get to some wine. And I have Michelle, Heron, and Heather Holley here. Hello, ladies. How's it going?
Hi, Liam.
Hi, Liam and Michelle. Yay, first episode.
Oh my goodness, our first episode. This is, I like feel like giddy. I'm like I feel like it's like first day of school vibes here. Like, what's happening?
It's so exciting that this is finally here because we've been talking about it for weeks and weeks and weeks and preparing.
Yeah.
And now we're doing it.
Yeah, big time, right? And so I've gotten a lot of questions, right, about, you know, the difference between Crime Over Wine and Crime Over Wine Weekly. And so let's kind of like give them a little bit of a feel for this, right? So Crime Over Wine, to be clear, on your Wine Wednesday is not going anywhere. I wouldn't do that to you guys, right? You guys know me better than that at this point. We're just adding another show. And so Heather and Michelle are going to be joining me every single Sunday as my permanent co-hosts on this wild journey. To give you crime headlines, right? Cases that are happening right now.
Which is so exciting. And it really, like, you get the sense of like a news feel, but like the true crime feel at the same time. And that's what I love about it the most.
Yeah, and not a lot of people are doing this, right? Like, I feel like not like everyone's doing, you know, those cases that are tied up very nicely. Not a whole lot of people are doing the cases that, you know, are happening right now because people tend to kind of shy away from those because there's not like, it's not as sexy, I feel like, potentially, because it's not like, there's not that sense of mystery. There's not that sense of like, I know what's going to happen at the end. It's like playing out, and it feels almost, I feel like when it's like that, like when it's the cases that have already kind of like happened, there's this sense of like disconnect beyond, like, you know, it's like it almost doesn't feel real, whereas if it's playing out right now, it feels very real, right? If you're watching it on the news, I feel like, right?
And sometimes you might hear about a story, but then life happens and you never really find out what happened to that story. Were there any other developments? Was someone ever arrested? Did they ever figure it out? And that's why we're here. We keep track of all of these things, and we're going to keep you updated every week. Every time there's something new that you need to know about, you can count on us to tell you.
Right. That's the whole point, right? To give you 3 people who are as invested in these cases as you are. And we are going to be keeping an eye out for these cases 100%. And we have a lot of interesting, crazy cases that we're going to kick this podcast off on. But first, we have wine, of course, because we wouldn't lose that part of the podcast. Absolutely not. So we're drinking Apothic Rosé. It blends layers of strawberry and watermelon for a refreshing wine that is both light in color yet dark in nature. And so Heather, you picked this one out. And so I'm wondering what kind of like drew your eye to this one.
I won't lie, it was the gothic vibes, and it on the label it says a rosé with dark secrets. I was like, ooh, tell me more.
Well, and so it's a darker pink for sure. Because you like, I think of like a rosé and I think of like an orangey kind of rosé, like pink kind of flavor or kind of color. And this is like pink. This is pink. And so I'm gonna get a whole lot of like fruit flavors in here, like real bold fruit flavors for sure.
And it it tastes like a rosé, but if you're ever in the mood for like, I want rosé, but a
Yeah.
little bit different, this is definitely it. Like, you do get
Mm.
those fruity flavors on the front end, but on the back end, it's very smooth, like the way a
Yeah.
red wine
Mm.
is. And I was telling Heather, I was like, I would
Yeah.
get this again. I really like it.
Yeah, and it honestly doesn't even really taste too much like a rosé. It honestly kind of tastes more like a Chardonnay almost, dare I say. Like, it doesn't really taste pink to me. It tastes more white.
It's definitely a
Yeah.
little bit different. And if that's the vibe that you're feeling, you know how sometimes you're just like,
Yeah.
I want something
Yeah.
different.
Yeah,
There you
and
go.
Heather definitely picked the different one for sure, because this one, you're right. It definitely, the label gives some dark gothic vibes for sure. Well, let's talk about because I had this week on Crime Over Wine a pretty intense case, right? That was, pretty straightforward. It wasn't, I feel like, not a whole lot of like what we're typically used to on Crime Over Wine, whereas these like weird mysteries, like we found out about what happened to Noema Graber pretty early on in that episode. And again, for everyone who's listening at home, like this, we're gonna do this in Crime Over Wine weekly too. We're gonna talk about the cases that we're talking about on Crime Over Wine, so that way you guys can feel involved and get a little bit more content out of this. And so, Michelle, Heather, what did you all think about what happened to Noema? Because I have so many thoughts. A lot of them involve 4-letter words. And so I'm wondering if y'all have those similar thoughts as well.
Yeah, I definitely, that case really got me. And it does make you think about, you and Lori really talked about just how she had like a normal schedule and how many people do get set in like those routines and those things that you do. And I do think that that definitely played a factor, and it does just make you think. And it's terrible that somebody would even take advantage of
Yeah.
something like that, but it did. Like, I was like, I do a lot of the same things at the same
Yeah.
time every
Mm-hmm.
day too.
Yeah, and I think about that a lot too when it comes down to like just like the things that you just do on a regular basis. Like, it is really easy for someone to take advantage of you for that reason, right? Just because you like, we were just talking about how, because like, as part of this podcast, right, like my job, which I let everyone down on this week, so everyone knows at home, like my job is to get the wine. And so I just said I'm gonna go home, go to the liquor store after work now every Monday and get the wine for the week. And it just seems like a typical task for me, but like if someone is out there wanting to harm me, it's easy to latch onto that, right? And we all have those routines. We just don't like to think about it like that, but we do, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of times you go and you fall into those habits that feel comfortable to you, like those places and things like that. And because it does feel so familiar, but sometimes that can be the part that's where it gets dangerous sometimes,
Yeah, absolutely.
unfortunately.
Something that really stuck out on this case for me was my best friend is a high school teacher.
Mm.
And I know she has very strict routines, like with kids and stuff. And so thinking that this could happen to her potentially, just if the students took something the wrong way, it's heartbreaking and infuriating. She didn't deserve that. Obviously,
Yeah.
they had troubled lives. Like,
Oh yeah.
so much went wrong here.
Well, and like the grade excuse, right, was like is like such a poor excuse. I mean, obviously for obvious reasons, but like also because like they clearly were much more troubled than that. You know what I mean? Like it was like clearly the grade was just like the tip of the iceberg of like all of the problems that these two kids had. Certainly Willard in particular, he needs some serious psychological evaluation, which I hope he gets, for Noema's sake, frankly. And yeah, I mean, but again, like obviously for the reason behind this, I mean, is the big thing that just gets to me at the end of the day is you, and that's the thing, is that like you never really know how people are going to take what you say to them, right? I mean, that's kind of the, like, not hopefully that doesn't sound too victim blamey here, because obviously Noema did not deserve this in any way she performed, not that anyone would, but it just makes me sad to think that like that she was just doing her thing, doing her job, was probably seeing a lot of potential in these kids, and that's why she was coming so hard on them, because otherwise it would have just, if she really didn't think that they were ever gonna come to anything, then she probably would have just passed them just for the sake of, like greasing the skids. And so, and they took it obviously way too far. And that's kind of what makes me sad, is that it seems like it just didn't make any sense. And especially Jeremy, because it wasn't, he had nothing to do with that.
Yeah, it just, for me, feels like some kind of systemic failure from the ground up.
Mm,
These boys didn't just all of a sudden have trouble in their lives.
yeah.
So somewhere along the way, they were failed multiple times
Right.
and led to, unfortunately, a whole family being destroyed and
Mm,
devastated, and a woman losing her life
yeah.
over something. As in the grand scheme of things, your grades are really small.
Right.
Like, they're
Oh, yeah.
important, but that's
Right.
so small when you look at everything in life.
Right. Right. Man, well, yeah, crazy case. And again, we have to talk about these ones too, even though again they're tied up in a nice little bow. We have to talk about it because otherwise, again, someone told me recently, people die when you stop talking about them, and so let's not let Nuima, Nuima's memory die, right? Like let's keep that going. And so again, if you're hearing this, share that story with a friend, so that way we can keep that going for sure. But coming up just on the other side of this commercial break, we're going to talk about some news of the week, some cases that are unfolding right now, that you should have your eye on. So we will see you in just a few minutes. Crime Over Wine is sponsored by BetterHelp. As someone who's used therapy for years, I know that finding a therapist can sometimes be a stress on its own, juggling your full-time job, your family, your friends, your podcast, and trying to find the right therapist on top of that can almost feel impossible. That's where BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp matches you with a therapist that works for you on your terms. It's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to one of 33,000 licensed professional therapists in as little as a few days. And because finding a new therapist is a lot like finding a new bottle of wine, if you don't jive with your therapist, you can easily switch to a new one at no additional cost. You can get 10% off your first month of BetterHelp by going to betterhelp.com/crimeoverwine. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/crimeoverwine for 10% off your first month. Join over 4 million people who decided to get help and get happy with BetterHelp. Of course, we have to start our News of the Week segment talking about the latest developments in the infamous murder case of Laci Peterson. The Los Angeles Innocence Project has taken up the case against Laci's husband, Scott Peterson, who was convicted for the murder of Laci and their unborn child back in 2004. Scott has maintained that he is totally innocent ever since his conviction, but just this week, the Los Angeles Innocence Project took the case and asked the court to allow DNA testing of a cloth from a mattress found in a torch van that was just a mile from the Petersons' house the morning after Laci went missing in 2002. Laci's body was found in April of 2003 when she washed ashore near San Francisco Bay, and Scott claimed his original excuse was that he was fishing the morning that Laci went missing on December 24th, 2002. When Scott was arrested just a while after Laci was found, he had dyed his hair and grown a goatee. He was also found with nearly $15,000 in cash and his brother's ID. Scott was sentenced to death, but was resentenced in 2021 after he was granted a new trial. Scott believes that a burglary that took place right across the street from the Petersons' home had something to do with Laci's murder. The Los Angeles Innocence Project says that they intend to seek a retrial on behalf of Scott. The organization said police had failed to investigate critical evidence thoroughly. And so obviously, I mean, an infamous case. I mean, this has been going on for 20 years, right? And so, I mean, everyone who knows about true crime knows about Laci Peterson intimately, I feel like.
And I'm showing my age a little bit here, but I remember when all of this unfolded, I was in high school, and this case, like, it basically was going on all 4 years that I was in high school. And then to have it resurface, in 2021,
Right.
and all of these new developments happen, it's just it's crazy to think
Yeah.
about.
And a little like like note here, I suppose. Like, so a lot of people have been talking about the Innocence Project. The Innocence Project put out a statement saying that this is like a slightly different operation. Like this is the Los Angeles Innocence Project, not the Innocence Project. And so that's a pretty important distinction, I suppose, at least to them. And so take that as you will, I suppose. But the Innocence Project, obviously, I mean, their reputation precedes them. I mean, they've taken all sorts of different cases. I can't even begin to name them, frankly, because they've taken a lot of high profile cases, and a lot of high profile cases that have ended up in conviction reversals too. So it's a big deal. This is not to be taken lightly.
Yeah, it definitely is.
All right, Michelle, what you got?
Okay, who else has been following that crazy story out of Kansas City where the 3 guys were found dead outside of their friend's home after watching a Chiefs game? I mean, how many people have done this, just to go watch their favorite team, especially the Chiefs right now? They're on fire.
Right.
And, there's just so much hype with all of that. It's insane to think. Everyone has been waiting to find out how David Harrington, Clayton McGinney, and Ricky Johnson died. They were found dead in the backyard of their friend Jordan Willis's home. The Kansas City Police Department has received the toxicology report for all 3 men that just came out, and it shows that there were, quote, several substances in their body. Toxicology reports determine if there were any substances like alcohol, drugs, and more in a person's body at the time of their death. Now, police have said from the beginning of this investigation, they do not suspect foul play in the investigation, and that this is not a homicide investigation. Now, Willis, the guy who held the watch party and lived in that home, he has since checked into rehab. His attorney says that Willis had no idea that his friends were dead outside. Now that the toxicology reports are back, the medical examiner will use that information to determine a cause of death, but it's not like that's going to happen overnight. That could take several more weeks. And then that information will be turned over to the police department for them to continue their investigation and determine where the case goes from there. But like, this story has been making headlines everywhere. Yeah. And it's just like, what happened? I mean,
yeah, no, it is crazy. And again, when I first heard about this, I like my initial instinct was some kind of like, because this all happened during that like freak winter storm that came across the country, and my initial assumption was, oh, they got trapped outside. They must have just frozen to death, right? Like, and especially there's lots of different research and reports that show that alcohol and or drug use can like exacerbate the effects that extreme temperatures can have on your body. Like you can get really bad like skin cancer for being out in the sun for too long, just because you drink a little more alcohol than normal, and the reverse effects as well, and in different conditions too. But the several substances, man, I mean, there's lots of reporting, as Michelle and I we were all talking about, at the beginning of the episode, before we start recording, there's lots of different reporting on what those substances are. It's kind of iffy, it sounds like, right? And so I don't really know how like confirmed any of that is, so I think we don't really want to say that here. But I mean, that adds a different layer to this. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. It definitely does. And, the families of those victims, they've said, maybe there were some substances that might be found in their bodies, but that doesn't mean that they deserve to die. No. You know what I mean? And, the other thing that's just kind of weird about it all is like they had been out there for 2 days, like girlfriends and family members of those guys were like, where are you, until one of them finally went and was like knocking on the door, and that's when police showed up. And the guy that lived in the home like answered and said that he had been asleep for 2 days. And some people are like, how in the world can that happen? And I think some people have brought up like the career background of the friend that lived in the home, that if he wanted to do something he could have, that's kind of all the rumor mill, but it is enough to just be like, wow, how can something like that happen? I mean,
Right. And because we just covered the Ryan Stuka case on this podcast, which I have not been able to get out of my brain since the first time I heard about this, like years ago. And so it's kind of funny. It's because it's kind of the same idea, because it's like this mysterious situation. Record cold temperatures were involved, alcohol was involved, different substances were involved, and it's just interesting to me that like there's so like think about how many cases are out there where drugs were involved, where alcohol was involved, and like it's just like recreational things that like people have been involved in many times before, will be involved in many times after, but you're putting yourself into this situation where like your mind is clogged, again, not in like a, again, not in a victim blamey way here at all, but just because you're putting yourself, but like these situations are inherently fuzzy, right? Like when you go to ask people about what happened, you're like, did that happen? I don't know. Like it's just one of those situations where it's inherently unclear, right?
Yeah, and it's a risk that you take, even just like an
Yeah.
antibiotic
Oh
from
yeah.
the doctor that they prescribe. It says on the bottle, do not
Right.
drink, but I think lots of people out there been like, well, I could
Yeah,
have,
just one
a
glass
glass
of
of
wine.
wine with dinner,
Right.
you
Been
know.
there. Right.
So it kind of it's a risk that that you take when you decide to have a
Yeah.
drink or do something like
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
But I've also seen autopsy reports that, yes, there might have been things found in the toxicology section, but that's not what at all led to the
Right.
person's cause of death. That could be someone trying to mask the cause of death and hoping that people just assume, oh, it's an overdose. They found fentanyl or whatever. But again, we don't know that that's what happened to these guys, but it is possible that you do have something else in
Mm.
your system, but that's not why you died.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, right? Yeah, because I remember there was like there was this case I covered, and it was the Jenna Franks case, actually. It was episode 20 something, 26 maybe, if I believe so, of the Crime Over Wine podcast. And there was in that situation, I very much so remember, because I covered that as a local news reporter. And there were all sorts of wounds all up and down her body. But yet there was like this real like intense, for some reason, like from a public perception standpoint, fixation on the fact that she had drugs in her system. And it just like always has, ever since then, has rubbed me the wrong way, right? Because it's like just because you do drugs, like obviously like regardless of what happens to you, you don't deserve to be stabbed 100 times, but like what does that say, right? Because it's like what does that really say about the situation if we're like fixating so hard on like, and like a lot of those drugs can be misreads, right? Because there's a lot of situations where like your body will naturally form alcohol, for example, right? And like it can be passed as alcohol even though you never had a drink. And that I mean, that's a reality of the situation. And so it's like it's an interesting kind of like thing that like once we find out that there's drugs or alcohol involved, it's suddenly like so much more salacious. But when we're like maybe right, that like once more information comes out, maybe we find out that actually had nothing to do with them. Like maybe there are all sorts of wounds on their body that we just don't know about yet, right? Because police haven't shared that. Hypothetically speaking, of course, we don't know that.
And that's why it takes so long to get toxicology reports back, for cause of death to
Right.
come back, because like just because that report came back, that report has a bunch of chemicals and things that were found in the body, and then it has the percentage of how much of that was actually in the body. And that could be like, maybe someone did cocaine 2 weeks ago. I don't know how long that stays in your body, but it could be something that maybe you did a while ago, but that doesn't mean that you did it that night. And so that is where the medical examiner and their expertise and their craft and their career, or field rather, is that's where it's important, and that's where it comes to play, because they have to sit and do all the calculations of, okay, this much is what was found in the blood, this is how big their body is, and kind of calculate it, and that's where they determine this contributed,
Mm-hmm.
this did not. Just because something is found in your body doesn't mean that it
Right,
killed you.
right, even if it maybe if it did kill you, right? Like, maybe who's to say that somebody did that to you at the same time, too, right? Like, maybe like it could
Hmm.
have been, it could have been them taking it on their own accord. It could have been something, or it could have been someone. It could have been something much more mischievous here, or maybe even if it wasn't, a fatal dose of whatever was found in there, whatever several substances were found in their bodies. Maybe they were locked outside during this, intense snowstorm, and so we just need to know. We just need to know what all happened, right? Like, we need to, like, I
Hmm.
like that. That's the situation here. Is that like this slow drip of information in this like real interesting case, but we need to know like there needs to be a lot more details that come out, and I think pretty safe to say in this case certainly that they're holding some things close to the chest, or this is really just seems to be what it is, right?
Yeah, and when you're able to zoom out and look at the picture as a whole, or maybe as much of a whole as you're going to get, that's when you really are able to see the situation for what it
Mm,
is. And that's where you really have to trust the people that are in charge of doing
right.
this. You know what I mean? And you can't just fly off and make one judgment off of one little piece of information, because that's not the whole picture.
Yeah, and it's really easy for folks like us who are so involved in true crime, right? Who are so interested in true crime to like want that, right? Because it's like someone dies and you just need to know everything, because like you listen to these cases and it's, again, neatly tied up in a bow in an hour, and you know exactly what happened within an hour. But that's not how, real criminal investigations work. So, again, patience is key. Again, I'm more so telling myself that than anything else, if we're being honest. So
Yeah, it definitely, like, especially in the current age of technology we live in, where we're so connected around the world, social media. I mean, law enforcement posts so much on social media now that we get updates almost instantaneously on cases. But at the same time, they need to do their job thoroughly and well, because
right.
at the end of the day, they're serving a victim and their family and making sure that they get justice if that is needed here. And you have to give them the time to make sure they have the evidence they need and they're laying out the facts that they need and they can prove that. Otherwise, the victim isn't going to get the trial and the outcome they deserve.
Right. Yeah. No, super important to keep all that in mind. Because, too often, like shady journalists, right, will like publish things that they really shouldn't have. And then all of a sudden things get much harder. And so, ethical journalism, ethical true crime journalism is important. And I know that you both know that, and that's why I'm so glad you're here.
And Heather, what do you have this week?
So, the case I'm sharing this week is about a Maryland deputy killed in the line of duty 52 years ago. However, there have been new developments in what was a cold case in the last couple of weeks. Deputy Justin Hall worked for the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, and on October 23rd, 1971, he covered another deputy's shift, and that included working security outside of a country club. That night, Deputy Hall came across two burglary suspects. One of them shot Hall in the head when he shined a flashlight at them. The deputy was rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately never regained consciousness. Hall died 3 days later. The investigation didn't get far over the years until the Montgomery County cold case detectives reopened it in 2021. Among the evidence, they found an old reel-to-reel recording of an interview from 1973. The FBI was able to digitize that audio, allowing the detectives to hear Larry David Becker share what he claimed to know about Hall's killing. He was sharing this information in hopes he'd be given leniency in an unrelated burglary case he was just arrested for. At that time, investigators discounted his story, saying he was lying, but the cold case detectives felt Larry knew enough details to place him at the scene, so they started to track him down. And in that search, investigators learned Larry had changed his name to Larry Smith and moved to upstate New York. In 2022, detectives knocked on the then 70-year-old's door. They ended up interviewing him for about 4 hours, slowly introducing the 1971 murder of the deputy into the conversation. The detectives told Smith they found the old recording and they wanted to know what he saw. They also assured Smith if the shooting wasn't on purpose, it wasn't really murder. Smith said, quote, "I would never intentionally try to shoot anybody." One detective asked if he was saying he accidentally shot the deputy, to which Smith replied, "I guess so." They then got Smith to repeat it several times, and within hours, the detectives obtained a warrant to charge Smith with first-degree premeditated murder. Smith's trial started mid-January of this year. The defense argued Smith, with an IQ of 83 and failing memory, was impressionable and accepted what the detectives suggested to him as the truth. However, prosecution claims Smith's confession is valid, and it's, quote, a core memory. The jury deliberated for days before telling the judge they couldn't reach a unanimous verdict, so a mistrial was declared. Smith remains in jail with no bond, and his retrial is set to begin June 17th of this year.
Hmm. So he admitted on a hot mic that he did this, or that he knew more about this. Am I right about that? And
Yeah.
then later on said, "Oh, I did it by accident."
So in 1975, it was 2 years after the shooting.
Mm-hmm.
So 1973, he was arrested for a burglary. And in a desperate move, he was hoping he would get leniency if he was like, hey, I know information about that deputy's shooting. So they let him say what he had to know. And overall, at that point, they said he was lying and none of that was true.
Interesting. Okay. Man, okay, so I think this just goes to show you, I think that like it's never too late to put some of these cases to bed, right? Because I think that there's so much there to unpack for sure. And like going back to 1973 of all this.
Yeah, and so both the victim's daughter, Deputy Hall, and the suspect's daughter are alive at this point. Hall's daughter testified in court, as well as Smith's, and Smith's daughter actually told investigators she called him after that interview and seemed kind of confused, and he was like, I guess I killed someone. Like, he wasn't even sure, and she was like, no, that's not something you guess about. You did
Yeah.
or you didn't.
Right.
It was a 4-hour interview process, and as they got into it, they were like, so, I mean, if you did do it and it was an accident, it's not murder. And then kind of working into, so are you saying you accidentally shot the deputy? So you're
Yeah.
saying you shot the deputy?
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about his age being that old, in his 70s. If he really does have an IQ, if he did not have anyone advocating for him, whether that be a lawyer, a family member, to really understand what's going on here and what's on the line, I don't know. I don't feel good about it, but I see the other side too. You've got a family of a law enforcement officer that's waited so freaking long, wanting to know what happened.
But having the wrong person isn't gonna be justice either.
Exactly. But I wonder if there's a connection between the two. Did they know each other? Were they around each other?
The suspect was only 19 years old when all this happened.
Wow.
And there are reports that the burglary he was arrested for and questioned for in 1973, that during this 4-hour long interview in the 2000s, that he started confusing the two and then started adding details to it that may or may not have been true. I mean, because this is also the 70s. There's no surveillance video. There's it's not what we have today at all. The fact they had to have the FBI digitize the audio should kind of show you just how little evidence they have compared to today.
Right. Yeah. And right. And who even knows how reliable that is either. I'd be curious to know, like, the experts, how actually, like an independent expert, how confident they actually feel in what they're hearing.
Yes, because they one of the reports I read did indicate it, even after the FBI was able to digitize it, the audio quality is still not great.
Man, that's an interesting one, Heather.
Yeah,
I'm
I want to know what happens.
Yeah, right. And then especially too, because we don't see a lot of like hung juries a lot of times either, right? And so the fact that now we're at a place where, because that's the big thing, right? Is that like that's why like so many people take plea deals, right? Because you just don't know about a jury. Like you just don't know about a jury, right? Again, OJ Simpson. And so like this is just fascinating to me that Like it's that. I mean, I feel like it. Like I don't know what Michelle's feeling right now, but I would venture a guess that like we probably have three very different opinions about what happened here, and look at the jury of our peers, like very much so on the same bench of that they're split down the middle of this thing, and it's having real life consequences. What, 50 years later?
Yeah, more than that. And a couple of things to add also for your consideration. Smith has maintained his innocence since he was charged.
Mm-hmm.
He and his attorney is looking to have at least one charge dismissed, including the premeditated murder.
I'm so curious to know where they got the premeditated murder from, because I'm not really seeing evidence of that necessarily, unless it's just like it just doesn't seem as though he's being completely truthful about the. I mean, which they clearly aren't buying that it was a big accident. But I'm not really seeing like a direct tie to premeditation here.
Yeah, because even the original reporting from police about the actual killing of the deputy was he was working, came upon two people carrying what appeared to be stolen goods. He asked them, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" and shined a flashlight at him, and one of them shot him twice.
Wow.
One hit his hand and the other hit him like by the ear. And
Hmm.
unfortunately that ended up being a deadly shot.
Yeah. And can we also take a moment to talk about how, again, like we don't give enough credit here, because a lot of times we're talking about victims that are not in law enforcement. We don't really do a lot of cases of victims in law enforcement, but just to give credit to the fact that this is not an easy job, right? Like, again, we can sit here armchair quarterback this thing all day long about how cases are investigated, but these people are putting themselves into precarious and dangerous situations on the regular, and I think this is just a really good example of that, right? Of how hard that job can be.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say that he had picked this shift up. The other deputy he was filling in for had actually called him during dinner and was like, "Hey, can you cover for me?" And he asked his wife and she's like, "Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead and go." And
Mm,
the fact that he wasn't even supposed to be there, and I can't imagine what his wife felt like after all this happened, because she said it was okay. And it's more dangerous despite all the calls for reform and everything. Like, yes, every profession can be better, but there's danger in that job. Like, no
mm,
matter how you put it, whether they're good or bad, there is an underlying danger every time that they clock in.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and when you just said that, because I don't listen. I've said it over and over and over again. I do not believe in coincidences when it comes to homicide investigations. And so the fact that it just so happened that he was there, maybe that's like a part of this that we just don't know yet. That points to premeditation. That is kind of interesting to me, that maybe he knew that, like, that this even if like this other officer or deputy wasn't necessarily directly involved, which I'm not necessarily insinuating here, but like the maybe this Larry guy potentially knew, at least from according to investigators, that this dude was subbing in and like had it out for him some way, shape, or form. I don't know. I feel like I'm stretching here, but that's I'm trying to make sense of the premeditated charge, because I'm not really hearing that.
I'm stuck a little bit on, okay, Larry, why'd you change your name?
Fair.
Why do people change their names? I don't know. I mean,
So there is an answer to that, actually. Larry was
oh,
born Larry Smith. He was adopted at a younger age and became Larry Becker, and had a terrible home life and ended up running away and lived on the streets for most of his life.
Mm.
And after he moved and got away from that adoptive family, he moved from Maryland to New York. Um, he changed his name back to his birth name, Larry Smith.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. But had that situation not happened, like, I can understand that, but I can't really think of like, why else would someone change their name? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
even if it's back to their original name.
What I can't get over is why in 1973, just 2 years after this murder, law enforcement was like, "No, he's lying." They were
Yeah,
much
true.
closer to the investigation than the cold case detectives are now, I'm
Mm.
sure.
Yeah, Heather, this is a tough one. You're going to have to keep us updated on this one. Please let us know all the developments, because I am confident that the people at home are going to be banging on our doorstep trying to figure out what the heck happened here.
So wait a minute. A mistrial was declared, but he's in jail with no bond, waiting for his retrial.
That is correct.
Yeah,
And
that
I
is interesting.
could not find an explanation for that.
Interesting. I wonder if that one is going to be streamed on Court TV.
sure.
I like that. I love watching.
We know you do.
Gavel to Gavel. Yeah, I would sit and watch that all day.
So little for all the listeners at home, little known fact about Michelle is that she's a huge court lady. When I used to sit next to Michelle at work, she Judge Judy all night long, baby. She's a huge Judge Judy fan, so that's her girl.
I have 4 signed pictures of her, and it is still my dream to meet her one day. Like, I really want to meet her.
How do you get signed pictures of Judge Judy?
People that know me, that give them to me as gifts.
Were they defendants in her courtroom?
No. I guess you can just like get them, and then one like actual priceless gift was when I left TV briefly, or I left news briefly for about a year, and when I left the station, they did like a little montage, like goodbye video of like people saying goodbye, and at the very end they had a little clip from Judge Judy in her home saying like, "Good luck, Michelle, this is Judge Judy," and like she has marble floors.
Of course she does. She's Judge
She
Judy.
has marble floors. Yes. Like you can tell that is Judge Judy's home. Anyway, I freaking love her. Like, she is a queen in my book.
Crime Over Wine Weekly will be right back, and we're going to be highlighting some missing persons cases, and let's see if we can do these.
Get ready for that big test with Study.com. Study.com offers learning materials and test prep, even LSAT study prep guides for all of my legal nerds listening. Unfortunately, there aren't any wine study guides, and believe me, I did check. Listeners can get 30% off their first 3 months of any subscription level using the promo code CrimeOverWine. Again, that's promo code CrimeOverWine, no spaces, for 30% off your first 3 months at Study.com. Learn faster, stay motivated, study smarter with our sponsor, Study.com.
Welcome back to Crime Over Wine Weekly. We're now going to take a few minutes to talk about some missing persons cases from across the country. First up, we have 22-year-old Darius Appia. He's been missing since January 24th of this year out of Fredericksburg, Virginia. Now, he is described as a black man, brown hair, brown eyes, about 5'11", maybe 170 pounds. A GoFundMe that has been set up by his family shares a little bit more details surrounding kind of the day that he went missing. Darius was picking up a meal that he had ordered after leaving work, and he hasn't been seen since. His car was discovered by police in a park 2 days after he went missing. His family is raising money to hire a private investigator. They want to use some of that money to offer a reward to encourage participation from the community and also help with search efforts. The GoFundMe has already raised $16,000. His mother and his family, obviously, they're distraught. They've held search parties for him. Virginia State Police say that he is considered an at-risk missing person. His disappearance poses a, quote, credible threat to his health and safety, as determined by the investigating agency. He was last seen wearing a blue winter coat, blue jeans, and brown hiking boots. Again, his name is Darius Appia. He's 22 years old. If you have any information about where he may be, call 911 or the Stafford County Sheriff's Office at 540-658-4450, and that's out of Fredericksburg, Virginia.
You know, it's always interesting to me because I'm about to talk about a case very shortly about a person whose car was also found very shortly after they went missing. And it's always interesting to me because I never really know what to make of that. Right. Because it's like it could either be something malicious or something suspicious, or it could be, in this case, it could possibly be that he, left his car somewhere and went into a park, and who knows, right? Like, because it seemed I like the vaguity here of at risk missing person, and that he poses a credible threat to his health and safety could mean a lot of things. Like
Yeah.
it's all very vague and obviously intentionally vague. But it's interesting. Like the circumstances here are interesting because I could see this going one of two ways.
Yeah, and you never know what could happen. I mean, I eat in my car a lot of times. Sometimes I just don't like to wait. I'm too hungry and I don't want to wait until I get home. I just want to eat right now, alone in my car.
Relatable.
And and maybe he ate and got out, and I don't know, maybe there was a body of water and he could have just been standing near there and maybe fell. I don't know. I've also had like just sometimes people with not good intentions can come up to
Right.
you and who knows what happens and then you're gone. Who knows here, but he is considered at risk. Obviously his family is just desperate and wanting to know where he's at, and it really looks like the community is coming together. I mean, the fact that it's been about 2 weeks and they've already raised
Yeah.
$16,000. I think that says a lot that, people want to help this family and they want to help bring Darius home.
And this is one of those cases that, is playing out right now. If you're listening to this, shortly after we drop this episode, it's playing out as we speak. And if you're in the Fredericksburg, Virginia area, you can help, right? And that's so important. And that's why we are doing this podcast, right? Because you can lend a hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, Heather, what you got this week?
So, Detrez Green has been missing for 7 years. The Georgia boy was just 2 years old when his mother reported him missing on January 22nd, 2017. This was just hours after a tornado hit their neighborhood in Albany. This week, WALB spoke with Detrez's grandfather, who says he believes the boy went missing before the storm, citing a history of domestic incidents between the boy's parents. Police say Detrez's family has never shared a photo of the boy with investigators, leaving the case at a standstill. Investigators are still asking anyone with information to contact them. And you can call the Dougherty County Police Department at 229-430-6600 or the GBI at 229-777-2080. And you can also submit tips through the GBI's See Something, Send Something app.
Yeah, Heather, I'm not gonna lie, I don't like this one at all. I don't like when it involves children, first of all. But I also don't like that there's weird circumstances here, all masked by a tornado.
Yeah, like, was the tornado a convenient cover-up, or did it actually have something to do with this
Yeah,
2-year-old's disappearance?
correct.
And when 7 years ago when this happened, police initially said that there should have been some evidence if he was pulled out of the home by the tornado, and they didn't find that.
Yeah, you think so. You think there'd be something, right? Like I that's what, like, again, like thinking of Ryan Stuka, like there, like if Ryan Stuka like went out into the wilderness and froze to death, you would have found something. And same thing here, right? Like if there was a natural disaster that killed this young boy, you would have found a piece of clothing, you would have found shoes, you would have found blood, you would have found something.
Yeah, and they didn't just search his home, they searched that whole neighborhood. They crossed
Yeah.
county lines. That search was very intense for days, if not weeks, right after it happened, and for
Yeah.
a very long distance.
Yeah. Well, and like I've heard like tornadoes can rip you out of your home and throw you like yards away,
Mhm.
like hundreds of yards away. So like that doesn't seem too odd to me, but like the fact that like there's weird stuff going on at home, right? And that is not sitting well with me, first of all. And second of all, the fact that that like the family never shared pictures. Like, that is not sitting well with me at all. And again, the fact that they have not found a single piece of evidence that he was there during the tornado is not something I'm liking.
Yeah, it makes you wonder. I mean, because this happened in 2017. I mean, people at least have a picture on their phone.
Right.
Like, why wouldn't you at least share a picture with the people that are trying to help find your child?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that really just doesn't sit well with me, and it makes you wonder, like, why? Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. And it reminds me too of the Sneha Phillip case. If you guys remember, we did that, like, one of the first episodes of Crime Over Wine. It was the case, she went missing on 9/11 in New York City. And so that was like, there was like talk that maybe she ran toward the Twin Towers, and there were like a lot of people, like I think like 1,000 people, I want to say, who still have not been like definitively identified as being at ground zero. And so like that kind of tracks there too. But like, it just seems odd to me that like again, like, it's similar vibes in terms of like with Sneha, like there were like a lot of weird things happening leading up until her disappearance. And so it just seems odd that like she just happened to be one of the people who, like, there wasn't any evidence that she was at the ground zero. Same thing here, where like with Detrez, like there was a lot of weird things happening leading up to his disappearance. And like a tornado just happens to come, and like then no one's seen Detrez and still hasn't seen him for 7 years. Like, you'd think that like a disappearance like that with a tornado involved would be less, like, would be a little bit more random and less, like Heidi, you know what I mean? Like that, you think that, again, you'd think there would be something.
Yeah, because I mean, even playing devil's advocate here. Okay, if they shared a picture that they had of him now, somehow he is alive, a 2-year-old 7 years later is not going to look
Right.
anything like that. And let's say that, you did live through the tornado. It was a traumatic experience. Your cell phone was destroyed. There are stories all the time that go viral about someone's photo being found miles away. There has to be some shred of photographic evidence that this was your child.
Right.
But even in the initial stages of this investigation, police were talking to family members. Some family members have never even seen the little boy.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
And like, Heather, you mentioned about, tornadoes can carry debris miles and miles away. I've covered those stories. One specifically comes to mind when I was reporting in Eastern Kentucky. It was found several miles away. So that can happen. And the actual picture was still intact, which is crazy. The people that found it on their farmland, they would go around to different like flea markets, and they would carry it and just have it in their booth and be like, does anybody know who these people are? And it just so happened that the husband in the picture, the belt that he was wearing had the family's last name, like, not engraved, but you know how like you do with leather, you like burn it into the leather. It had their last name like burnt into the leather on his belt, and someone said, wait a minute, I know some people by that last name that live over here, and it traveled through the grapevine, and they were able to reconnect the picture with the family. It was an insane story, but getting back to what we're talking about, yeah, it just doesn't. But also, and think about it. If a 2-year-old survived a tornado somewhere, wouldn't people in this other community where he was found like rally to try and find
Right.
like where he belongs?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, assuming that he was found, I suppose, right? If that's what you're saying. And like,
Yeah,
I do
yeah.
feel like, because we're talking about Albany, Georgia, and like I've never been to Albany, Georgia. And so I'm not super familiar with the area, but I do know that like the surrounding areas, like, not too far from Albany are pretty woodsy, right? And so like maybe he like got thrown into the woodsy areas. I don't know. I'm stretching here. It's a stretch. Don't get me wrong, but like nothing else really makes sense out of this.
I feel like a lot of like the National Weather Service and those people and surveyors and stuff, they're going to follow the debris path. And so if it was like someplace that was woodsy or where there was damage, they're going to go and survey that area to see what they can see. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So I feel like it's not like it would be unchecked. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Well, and
To an
certainly,
extent.
yeah, and certainly like a toddler is a lot more, like a lot more predictable in terms of travel paths than a photograph, right? Like,
Hmm.
so I would imagine that you're probably right. Like, if he was carried by this tornado, he would have been along the path somewhere. You're definitely right about that, right? And they like they walk that to like determine all
Hmm.
that kind of thing to make sure that it is actually a tornado, that touchdown. But again, I keep going back to like the fact that like this home life was just not good, and like these parents just did not do anything to help to help find their kid, which is
It's
infuriating in
heartbreaking.
a different
So
world.
heartbreaking.
Yeah, I man. Man, yeah, I don't know what to make of this. Heather, you have some good ones this week. You're bringing us some real head scratchers here.
Thank you. I live to confuse the masses.
Good. Well, job accomplished, mission accomplished there for sure. Well, I have a case, y'all, that I think is that there's not a whole lot to know about, but there's a lot to unpack. And so let's talk about that, because we are talking about Sarah Graham. And today, actually, if y'all are listening, the day that this episode came out, marks 9 years since anyone has seen or heard from the 18-year-old. This takes us to Fairmount, North Carolina, about an hour south of Fayetteville. She worked at a local Walmart store in nearby Pembroke, North Carolina. She left her house in Fairmount to go to the store in the morning, which was about 20 minutes from home, but she never ended up getting there. About midday, police ended up finding her van abandoned along a road that's like a back road kind of area, but like still like a yellow striped road, that was likely on her route that was she would have been taking to work, but they did not find Sarah. Investigators have recently said that they haven't been able to find any evidence that Sarah did indeed leave for work that morning, though, interestingly, in the more like recent updates that they've been talking about here. So, which like to me says like one of two things, right? That like they're either casting doubt as to whether or not she actually did leave her house, or just simply saying that like, as we are verifying every step of this process, we haven't been able to verify this one step. So I guess take that as you will. But there, according to them, there wasn't really anything all that off about Sarah's life around this time. Everything about her seemed to be pointing to the fact that she was really enjoying her life in Fairmount, according to investigators. The FBI did step in eventually to lead this investigation into Sarah's disappearance, which all but seemed to have gone cold. If it hadn't been for a seemingly random spiked interest in the case just this past June. Investigators with the Robeson County Sheriff's Office conducted a ground search with canines throughout this farm near where Sarah's van was found. It's not clear if they found anything significant from that search. If they did, they didn't say it publicly, but the FBI said that after several interviews, they didn't think that everyone they spoke to was being 100% honest about what they knew about Sarah's disappearance, including someone who they described as being, quote, very close to Sarah. If you know anything about Sarah Graham's disappearance, call the Robeson County Sheriff's Office at 910-671-3100 or the FBI Charlotte office at 704-672-6100. There is a $5,000 reward for information that leads to Sarah's location.
Wow. You really you feel for her. 18 years old. That's so young. Just trying to go to work. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah. And you like go look up pictures of her. She just looks like a very normal teenage girl, right? Like, I mean, it's really, there's like a lot of times in these types of situations, like again, my initial instinct in almost all cases involving like people who just seem to vanish into thin air is like, gang activity, is like mob activity, that kind of stuff. And so that just did not seem to be, again, from, if appearances mean anything to y'all, that did not seem to be the situation with Sarah, because she just looked like a normal, hardworking young girl, probably going to school, all that stuff. And yeah, I mean, it was just one of those situations where it was just like, you are going to your job, like you're getting up, you're doing the same thing that we've done over and over and over again without fail, without any problems. And what was different about this day is what I want to know. What changed on February 4th, 2015, that Sarah suddenly vanished?
Early on in that story, you're saying that, potentially one reason to share an early piece of information was casting doubt on if she even left home.
Yeah.
So at this point, is that confirmed? Did she leave? Do we know that for sure?
We don't know that for sure, and that was actually I said that pretty early in the story, but that was actually some of the more recent information that we've received. Because again, so they just started searching again in June of 2023, and as part of that like reinvigoration and like renewed interest in this case, the investigators also told reporters that they haven't been able to verify that she left home.
The cynic in me is saying the investigators are playing chess here
Mm,
because they've said
Mhm.
certain things to the media that
correct.
are typically not said.
Mhm.
So recently casting doubt on did she even leave? And then that someone very close to
Right.
her wasn't being truthful. It almost sounds like they're trying to like smoke that person out with this media coverage
Correct.
and get them to like cave in. Like, I'm sorry, PIOs. We know you play games too. Like, not play games, but we know that you are using what you say in the media sometimes to try to draw someone out.
See, and I think that's why Heather picked the wine today, because it says a rosé with dark secrets. She can kind of
Ooh.
smell when there's dark secrets hanging around.
Right. Well, but to that point though too, right? Like the dark secret of this, like, it definitely seems to be, revolving around whoever this like mysterious person that was so close to Sarah. Like again, like to Heather's point, like they never really say that, like in general, police meaning,
Mhm.
and so the fact that like they like but like they don't say who it is specifically, right? Like who is that? Like it's all kind of odd, and I don't know, I want to know who this person is, and like clearly they know, clearly they have suspicions about them, they just need to be able to pin something on them, maybe even catch them slipping up a little bit.
Okay, but then to kind of conspiracy theorist here, but let's go with there's not that person. There wasn't
Mm,
someone close to her, but they feel someone close to her might know more than they're saying.
sure.
So now you have her best
Mm,
friend, any exes or current boyfriend, her
Mhm.
family, cousins, whatever, teachers who might have been close to her being like, "Oh God, is that me that they're talking about?" Like,
mm.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. That's an interesting
Well,
take.
and also think about it, it's been 9 years,
Yeah.
so sometimes people might not remember what they said 9 years ago, so when they're going back to re-interview them, you know what I mean?
Mm,
And then things might change, because if you're trying to hide something, it gets harder and harder to remember what you were saying.
yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, and again, so I go back to the fact that like they seemed like seemingly out of the blue, like they never really explained why they started researching this like farmy kind of area, that was near where this van was found, and so I'd be curious to know like what sparked that up again. You know what I mean? Because it's like it's just it was not an anniversary. Like it didn't really seem as though, at least from what they said, that there was any new evidence that they found that suggested anything. And so maybe it was kind of what you're saying. Like maybe they just were like, we're catching this person that was so close to Sarah, like seemingly vulnerable in some way, shape, or form. And this just seemed to be like the way to just like put pressure on this person.
True.
It's just odd because you don't see that often where it's just like 8 years later, seemingly out of the blue, you're just gonna research a farm just
Hmm.
because.
you know, like someone either said something or saw something in a
Right.
recent time frame that gave them that, because it's not cheap either. Like,
Correct.
and it's not like these agencies just have the spare cash lying around to do kind of searches like that. It's well thought out and approved by a lot of people before they even start.
Mm.
Yeah, I wonder if in either they got a tip about something, or if in the past there's been some sort of like just suspicious activity, or just kind of
Right.
like people hanging around that area that
Yeah.
maybe shouldn't be hanging around. Yeah, but I
Yeah.
agree with Heather. Like there's a reason
Yeah.
why. they were looking.
Yeah. Oh, there has to be a reason, right? And like to that point too, especially in these kinds of parts of the country where it's a fairly rural area, like they know like those spots, right? Like there are a lot of those spots in those parts of the country, right? And like they know those spots that like the suspicious people are like think that they can get away with stuff in. Like police know a lot more than they let on, I suppose, right? Like they know this is the suspicious like parts of town that the weird kids usually like to hang out in. So I just feel there, like to your point, there has to be something. I mean, it feels like if we are gonna get somewhere, it's gonna be fairly soon, right? Like, I mean, we're getting further and further away from June of 2023, but we're definitely getting further away from February of 2015.
And I think the fact that there's $5,000 that's up for grabs here. A lot of cases you don't always have a reward that's being offered,
right?
And love it or hate it, but money talks. And some people, they are willing to talk if it means that they can get cash in their hand. And $5,000 is a lot of money to some people.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that is all that we have for you this week. Y'all, that was our first episode.
And wow, I mean, I think we set the bar pretty high.
I think we did.
After this.
Y'all, I think we're going to have to keep going with this. You guys realize this now. You guys are locked in because people are going to love this.
Yeah, I had anxiety before, but now the pressure's on. These were good cases.
You know what? The wine helps with that, I would imagine. So and so I'm very proud of us. No, but can I just say for a second, because again, I've been on this crime over wine journey for a little more than a year. I'm so happy to have you both on board on this because I this is going to be a great show. I hope everyone else sees the value here and the opportunity here. And I know that they're going to appreciate you guys for what you guys are bringing to the table. So let me just officially say, welcome to the Crime Vineyard in the permanent real way. So I'm just very happy that you guys are here.
Thank you, Liam.
I'm so excited. My roots are planted. I'm not going anywhere. I'm sorry, you're stuck with me.
Excellent. Well, we'll plant some grapes out of those roots. So I'm excited for that.
Make our own wine.
Correct. All right. Well, I can't believe we just finished our first episode. I feel like I've been like anxiety over this for a long time. So I'm so excited that we're finally launching. So if you guys just can't get enough of Crime Over Wine, make sure you follow all three of us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, as well as Crime Over Wine on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And we will see you all next Sunday for your next episode of Crime Over Wine Weekly, as well as this coming Wine Wednesday for your regularly scheduled episode of Crime Over Wine. Cheers!
Proud member of the Podnuga Network.